Welcome everybody to another week of Village Torah. We are discussing this week's Torah portion, and this week's Torah portion is the portion of Toledot, which literally just translates to generations. Really, if we had to assign an overarching topic, theme, really what is going on in this week's Torah portion is the fight between brothers, between Isaac and Esau. And so, or in Hebrew, Yitzchak and Esav are these two brothers. That's really what this Torah portion is about, Isaac and Esau. And their their competition for resources, you might say. Competition for affection, competition for attention, as well as, and this can't be stressed enough, resources. So ultimately, we see this towards the end, and I am tempted really to just go into bringing up the text on screen. I love doing that. I hope it's okay with people. If people don't like it when I bring up the text on screen, please let me know. What we have here is, I'm just going to do that. You know what? I'll provide. I'm sure I'm entertaining enough as it is on screen, but I love sharing the actual text that we're having under discussion on screen as well. So this is what we have in this week's Torah portion. We are still in the middle of chapter 25, where we left off last week's Torah portion with, and we now go into, and it's called Toledot, and although Toledot is really just part of a phrase, which is the beginning phrase of this week's Torah portion, which is Ve'ela Toledot Yitzchak ben Abraham, that this is the story, but more than just story. I think these are the generations, or these are the offspring. This is of Isaac, the son of Abraham. It's a lot more Toledot than simply children or generations. It's also a story. So Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah. Isaac pleaded with the Lord. She was barren again. This is something that we see over and over again. It's a common trope. It's a common theme in the book of Genesis, where matriarchs are barren. They struggle to give birth, and ultimately they are able to get pregnant. Faye, did you have something? No? All right. Yes.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes. That's right, Faye.
You hear me?
I can.
Because it said muted on this. This was unmuted now? You can hear me?
That's correct, Faye. You are now unmuted.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how to get unmuted. It said unmuted or muted, and two different choices.
Well, you figured it out.
Oh, I hope so.
Yes.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
I'm glad you figured that out. I'm very happy to celebrate that. So we have at the outside of, how did they come out? How did these two brothers come out? I'm sorry. So I misspoke earlier on. I said Isaac and Esau. It's Isaac's kids. It's Isaac's kids. It's Yaakov and Esav, or Jacob and Esau. I misspoke earlier on. I apologize. And my mind was certainly on Esau, not Isaac. It's just his kids. And what happens at the outset? Because oftentimes the origin story sets the tone for what's to come later on. And here, right at the outset, so Rebecca, I mentioned earlier, she struggled with pregnancy, but ultimately they conceive. She gets pregnant, and lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, they have twins. So we have literally equally born sons vying for all the resources of any parents. And we have one, which was...
Somebody's at my door. Excuse me. Who's there, please? Hello.
Alrighty. So the first one of these emerges red. Hairy mantle all over.
Pardon me?
The first one emerged like a hairy mantle all over. So they named him Esau. Somehow in the Hebrew, Admoni Kulo Kader Se'ar, Bikru Shmo Esav. Okay, so his name is Esau. Then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau. So they named him Jacob. Now, it doesn't really work in English, but in Hebrew, it actually does you can see this one, that his hand was holding Ba'akev, Esav. The Akev, and they named him Yaakov, which kind of, if we had to translate Jacob, it would be like the healer, because he was grabbing onto a heel, not healing as healing a sick person, but healing as he was grasping onto his brother's heel. So he was right there grabbing him and literally on his heels. And so he was there, and they describe him differently. The Bible describes him differently. The boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. So he's outgoing. He's hunting. He's an outdoorsy guy. We have Jacob on the other hand, who was much simpler. He sat in tents. So I don't know.
Oh, get down. Get down.
Okay.
Get down quick.
I'm gonna mute you. Okay. All right. So we really have these two very different boys. I mean, they really are quite different. And I think this really paints them as opposites, total opposites. We have one who just sits in tents and the other who's very outdoorsy and is a hunter. So these are vastly different temperaments, vastly different operational styles of these two twin brothers. Okay, then I'm not going to go into the details here, although I find it fascinating. Actually, you know what? Might as well. We've got the time, right? Okay, so one time, and this sounds like just a little incident, and yet it has a significant impact, at least on the relations and the relationship between these two brothers, that once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open famished, and Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, for I am famished." That's why he was named Edom. So now his name is both Esau and Edom, or Esau. So he has two names. And Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright, your firstbornness," which is interesting. It's interesting because they both were in the womb at the same time, although because Esau, or Edom, if we want to call him, came out first, so technically he retains the title of firstborn. So Jacob says, "Sell me this firstbornness." And Esau says, "I am at the point of death. What do I care? You can have it." So he sold it to him. So Esau spurned the birthright. Then we have all this stuff. I'm not going to go into this detail about Isaac and this incident. And then we have in chapter 27, Isaac gets old. His eyes were too dim to see. And he really wants to pass on. He's now thinking about what's to come and subsequent generations. So he called his older son Esau and said, "My son." And he responds, "Here I am." He says, "I am old now, and I do not know how soon it is until I have left until I die." So he basically tells Esau, "Go out, shoot me game, get me food, do your thing. I'm very impressed by this. Please do this." However, Rebecca apparently likes Jacob better than Esau. Apparently she's got a favorite. It seems almost as if Isaac favors Esau and Rebecca favors Jacob. It seems pretty clear here that they have their favorites. So Rebecca tells Jacob, "Hey, look, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau about this. So now I'm going to give you an inside track and I'm going to help you." And because ultimately what is at stake is this final blessing from Isaac, their father. And that's apparently it means a lot for them. And ultimately, Jacob and Rebecca teaming up, they are able to make it, they're able to make it look to Isaac as if Jacob is Esau. So she fetches, his mother prepared a dish such as his father liked. Rebecca then took the best clothes of Esau and had Jacob put those on. And here's really clever, because apparently Esau was a hairy man, whereas Jacob seemingly was not the same. And she covered his hands and the hairless part of his neck with the skins of the kids, which I think more as goat kids. Then she put in the hands of her son Jacob the dish and the bread she prepared, and then he basically says, look, I'm Esau. I came in, I hunted, I got what you wanted. And he basically tricks his father. He tricks his father into thinking he is Esau. And what ends up happening? A big blessing. We see in verses 28, 29 that he gives this huge blessing to Jacob in the stead of Esau, even though Isaac intended to give this to Esau. Esau wasn't there. But as soon as that finished, Esau came back from the hunt. He brought the dish. He made it all ready. And then Isaac is shocked. Wait a second. I already ate from this stuff. I already gave out the blessing. Too bad. And I don't really understand how blessings worked back then. Now we can give out blessings, but apparently this is really deeply significant because Isaac says, look, I already gave this blessing away. I don't have a second blessing to give you. Your brother already got this blessing. He came away with it. So now Esau is deeply disturbed by this. He says, look, first he takes away my birthright. Now, it's not really clear that he took it. I mean, he agreed in exchange. He bartered the birthright for a red lentil soup, two very different things. And this is really shocking. He says, Dad, didn't you reserve a blessing for me? And he says, well, I have actually made him master over you. I have given all his brothers for servants and sustained him with grain and wine. What can I do for you? He's like, and he asks the same question I'm very deeply curious and perturbed by. He only has one blessing. Blessing should be bound to, like, he should be able to bless him with all these things. Have you only one blessing? Come on. So he says to him, your abode shall enjoy the fat of the earth and the dew of the heaven above. Yet by your sword you shall live and you shall serve your brother. That's not really a blessing. That's not a blessing. But when you grow restive, you shall break his yoke from your neck. I don't see that as a blessing, unless you want to say you can break your yoke from your brother's, I guess, mastery over you. But that is just, yeah. Esau harbored a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing. Ultimately, Esau, being, as we saw him described earlier in this week's Torah portion, as being a hunter, an outdoorsman, he clearly has a certain physicality to him, significantly more so than Jacob has. So Rebecca knows that Esau is not going to do good things to Jacob. So Rebecca gives him advice and says, you're going to want to flee. You're going to want to get out of here. So go to my brother Lavan, stay until your brother's anger subsides and he forgets and all this stuff. Now, ultimately, there's more stuff, a little bit more, but going out to, actually, it's more of a coda to the story of Isaac going to Lavan, and then Esau, he goes and he took a couple of wives. So that's Esau. He goes off, does his thing, and we later see what happens ultimately between these two brothers. It's a little bit surprising, not what one would expect out of the interaction years down the road, although ultimately Rebecca is right. She's the insightful one. She's the perceptive one. It's not clear what the alternative would have been. What if Rebecca wasn't listening? What if she did not help Jacob then secure the blessing even through trickery to get it from Isaac? What would have happened? Would Esau, so clearly Jacob still would have had the birthright. He just wouldn't have had whatever this blessing was. Although to some degree it seems as if part of whatever blessings involved is the mastery over one's brother and vice versa, subservience to one's brother. So maybe if this had not occurred, there could have been a situation where Esau would have had dominance, would have had mastery over Jacob and descendants. And I don't even know that Isaac even wanted to even provide even a miniature blessing to Jacob. What we see is Esau has to beg and plead with his father to even get some tiny morsel of some sort of semi-blessing. And that's already with A, being his father's favored son. That's number one. And number two, like really, really begging him. Had Jacob come to him and asked for a blessing, it doesn't seem from the way that the story goes that he would have had a chance of even getting a little bit of a blessing. And then again, I'm not clear exactly the role and the power of these blessings. Also, it's some tough stuff as far as these two brothers in the relationship. They clearly they vied for attention, not just as siblings, but really as equally in the womb brothers and what they brought to the table. And it's also hard to talk about this Torah portion without thinking about food. We're already near lunchtime. I'm thinking about both the red lentil soup and also this game, all this food that was prepared for Isaac, as well as what's in the blessings. You get grain and wine. Like these, this is one of the more. I would probably say this is one of the more culinarily oriented Torah portions in, if not in the, certainly yes in the Torah, but definitely I would probably argue in the entire book of Genesis. Definitely very, very food oriented, and for the foodies out there, this is probably very enticing and appetizing. Yeah. Faye, did you want to have anything to add or ask, or if you wanted to unmute yourself, you could ask a question? I don't, doesn't seem to be unmuting. One thing I'm going to add is there's a notion of this, what ends up happening with these brothers. So later on down the road, we do see in this Torah portion that one of the names, like sort of the original name for Esau is Esav or Esau, and then we have this other name that pops up based off of this red lentil experience with the name of Edom, which has a sort of a verbal resonance. It has like a meaning of redness, that I guess he was a little bit more ruddy of complexion. And what the rabbis understand that the way that sort of the nation sort of spread out is that Edom basically are the European countries. It's sort of, that's how things shake out with people, that's sort of Edom. And there was kind of this, the rabbis had this sense a couple of millennia ago, 18, 20 centuries ago, that Edom also represented not just European countries, but almost specifically Christianity, like the Christian cultures. And some of the times that they would describe some of these cultural conflicts would be between the Jacobs versus the sort of the Edom or the Edomite sort of descendants, which is an interesting little sort of understanding of the way that things are, but like retrojecting them back into their biblical origins, which is a fascinating move on their behalf.
Very good, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
There we go.
Now can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Debbie.
I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that.
And your patience was great.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption.
We really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
We really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I've had that same Zygazint lecture several times from her.
Yes.
I'm sure you.
Yes.
Thank you. I learned a lot. I'll see you sometime this week.
Yes. All righty. Well, take care, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining. And Dave.
Anytime.
Anytime.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining in this week's episode of Village Torah. I hope you enjoy. I hope you have a wonderful Shabbat and great weekend. So thank you, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.